this next game I found interesting for a few points, and I hope you'll enjoy it as well. The main thing was the difference in skill level when you know you're playing against a better player. In this case, my opponent is much stronger than I am. He's an international master, and on Lee Chess, he outrates me by a full 100 points. That's typically a pretty good indicator. 2,600 is not easy to obtain, we should say. And one, it is normal for a higher rated player to try to get a lower rated player off the beaten path as quickly as they can. And this forces the lower rated player to play on their own. They're no longer supported by books and memory and engine analysis. And that's the normal path and theme. If I can create complications and get a position that I understand that my opponent does not, I have a tremendous advantage from the get-go. And I'm probably going to have an edge on the clock as well as other things. So as we get into this opening, first and foremost, this is kind of a interesting move order. It's not quite a Catalan. It's not a Catalan until I play d4. It still has the flexibility to be a lot of things. I mean, in fact, black can play d4 here, and we can end up with backwards Benoni's or Binko style structures. So that's kind of interesting. But if you sit around and wait, more than likely it's going to transpose into a mainline Catalan. Bishop e7, castles, d4, where c5 is a Tarrasch, c6 is the closed Catalan, and d takes c4 is the open Catalan. And this is predominantly what you're going to get. But my opponent in this game played d takes c4. And I played a move here that is second choice, but I did an analysis of this position, I want to say 2 years ago, and looked at the very simple approach. The main line is queen a4 check followed by queen takes c4. And I just was not satisfied at all that black gets everything he wants quickly and nothing doing. I like imbalances. So when we look at the stats in the database, white's winning 30%, black's winning 20%. He's got that stable little first move edge after queen a4, but I think in the most critical lines, black just equalizes. So I started looking at other moves here in knight a3 and castles kingside. Knight a3 is really getting off the beaten path in order to create imbalances at all costs. And I feel like I can get away with that with players that are 200 points or more underneath me in ELO. But I'm a big fan of castles here. As, all right, you got your pawn, you wanted your pawn, now what's going on? When you look in the database, everything is scoring pretty well for white. But my opponent plays the main move in a6, and I decide to play a move that has been played no times in the Lee Chess match. Oh, no, it's second. Second. First choice, let's look at that, is queen c2. And after b5, knight e5, knight d5. And this is definitely in my notes, and I just forgot it in the game, because as soon as I see this position, I remember it's all about this c5 plan. So you're happy to play d3. And on c takes d3, we have knight takes d3, and this is actually quite annoying as we have a full grip on the square, followed by knight c3, knight d7, and white already has a substantial edge after knight f4, where 3 games have been played, all of which by very, very highly rated FIDE players, all over the ratings of 2450 with both colors, and white won them all. So I find this idea very interesting because you really only need to remember that the knight on d3 is a boss controlling the c5 square. So coming back, I should definitely play my notes and go queen c2, but in 3-minute games, when you're trying to play quickly and maintain a time edge, especially against a stronger opponent, you will get off the beaten path. So my opponent should be quite happy here. And you need to know why these sidelines are bad. And this move is actually bad for white. It should not be played. Because not b6. My opponent clearly was in the same boat that I was in and was like, all right, this is some rando position, let's just play chess. So b6 signifies to me that my opponent does not know the theory here, and now we're going toe-to-toe in a heads-up game in a roughly equal position. So I don't mind that. Like, I like to see how good I am at this game. It's not just all preparation for me. So being able to go toe-to-toe with an IM is a major privilege, and I appreciate the opportunity. So what should black do is the question. Well, one of the prevailing problems in this position is the bad bishop on c8. So we're going to start with knight c6, and this gives two options. At some point, knight a5 could be very strong in order to hold the pawn, but the knight also coming to c6 helps with the push of the e-pawn. So if I simply go queen c2 to grab this pawn back, knight a5 is one option, that's good, and e5 is another option that's good. And if you're giving your opponent multiple options that are good out of the opening, we understand why a4 is boo-boo and should not be played, even though it's been played, and I want to say it was like 300 games in total, like 80 of them. So that percentage. Not interested in doing math. Thank you. I would probably go e5. Easy development. I would be very happy if I was playing black in this game. So a little side note there as we get back to the main game where b6 was played. And here I should definitely be going knight e5 without hesitation as we're hitting the rook. And then I really like not knight c6 because there's no reason to help him develop. I like knight a3 because it's giving you the option of either capturing on a3 where I'm going to do a rook lift or allowing me to take on c4, and more than likely this is going to be the way that it will turn out. And white's got some edge here because this clump and the rook on a7, it just doesn't quite feel right. A fianchettoed rook just seems kind of sad. I'm going to go b4 there, and this seems like a nice grippy position. b5 can't really be played because of knight a5. So I play queen c2 because I'm keeping tension. I saw after knight e5, eventually rook a7, bishop b7 would be played, and I said to myself, you know what, I want to keep tension in the position. I'm trying to win this game versus my opponent. I'm just going to go after this pawn. So I get my pawn back, and again, heads up, straightforward position. Only been reached 4 times in the Lee Chess database. And I go d3. Now we're following a game from Grandmasters Krasenkow and Serper, who I've worked with in the past. c5, same move that was played in that game. And I played knight c3. Previously, they had played knight b to d2. Bishop e7, solid, everybody's working. And here, you need to play hurry up. So it's already a position that I would say is easier to play for black because the burden of proof is on white. And when you find yourself in an equal position like this, where there's no clear plan, don't be afraid to bail out and just start playing reasonable moves in order to reach a playable position. So bishop f4, after castles, rook fd1, and still the plan is not abundantly clear, but after rook c8, I'm starting to like my chances some, as knight e5, I'm able to liquidate, and because this bishop is gone, he's got to worry about the a6 pawn. And that's going to buy some time one way or another. a5, I just don't have the stomach for that move, as that's going to give me the b5 square for either piece, and that doesn't seem right. So rook a8 was played in the game, and it's an interesting position because this is a key moment, as I think a lot of players will struggle on when to make the decision to create an imbalance or why. Or they're like, okay, I need to win, so I'm creating an imbalance, and they don't understand what they're going for. I think looking at this position, you have two options. If you're not sure about bishop takes f6 to create an imbalance, then d4 is the way to go. But I saw the weakened pawn structure. I see the fact that the bishop's covering here, and it wasn't so much I want a bishop versus knight as much as I want to ruin the queen side and create targets. So I make the decision to clip here and go a5. And now it's really a difficult task to hold on to everything for black and keep structural integrity. Takes, takes. And here, I just want no issues. I have snaggletooth your pawns. I have a weakness I'm focusing on. You can't really put pressure on me. Open files are meant to be used, so rook a2, covering the b pawn. And my opponent decides to bail out and try to go for this ending. And this is the most critical part of the game, and I am very critical of myself because I am trying to improve as a player. And when I saw this position, I'm like, okay, this should be an easy win. And this is the consequences of playing too many games against much lower rated players. I do it quite a lot for the channel for instruction. I think showing how to exploit ideas it makes the viewer more knowledgeable, and that's why I do it. So like, why don't you play higher rated players all the time? Well, they don't want to play against me all the time. It's when you get to about the top 2,000, when you put out a CCAD, you may have to wait for 3 to 5 minutes sometimes. Depending upon what time of day you're playing, there's a wait time. You play an unrated game and you're willing to play people up to 500 points underneath you, you can get a game like that. No waiting around. I don't like to wait. That's something that you don't ever think about the higher up you get. The first time I really felt the pain was when Grandmaster Naroditsky came to do the Panthers event, and I was watching him play online. He's in my house, on the touchpad like a boss. And his rating's so high, the only time you want to play anybody is if it's somebody close. So when they're 2,900, there may be one other guy that's on that's 2,750, so you just have to play him. Like, wow. High quality problems being so good. I know. I'm sorry. Back to the main topic at hand. I feel very much like I'm back in my teacher days with my tangents right now. This endgame should be trivial to win, but with the time, you're going to see the better endgame player emerge here, the more experienced I am. And I really want to focus on my mistakes. One, so I don't make them again, and two, so you get a better understanding of rook and pawn endgames. So I play rook d to a1, continuing my plan. Everything's perfect still, going after the weakness. I get the double pawns, but he's definitely going to be losing one. I clip, and he decides to come here. And I say to myself, okay, I don't really have a way to prevent him from getting some counterplay at some point. I mean, I can play a move like that, but, that has the consequences of rook d1. And if I play a move like that, I just feel like my pieces are passively placed. And yeah, so I play, according to the engine, at 26 depth. I play now it's jumped to 28 depth, and it's the second choice in the position. The options that you have are h4, king f3, and rook a7. And all of them are objectively pretty good. I'm not quite sure about h4. I don't know why that's the first choice of the engine, because I think it encourages a situation that you don't want. Like, h4, h5 is an automatic move, and it gives a luft for the black king. I wouldn't consider h4 because I think, from a practical standpoint, it makes black's life easier. I decided to go rook a7 because I want the potential to be able to double and put pressure on the f-pawn. So here, this is why the engine liked h4. It recommends g5 for black here. h4 would have stunted that move. So I guess either way, black can easily make a luft and it doesn't matter too much. But my opponent played g6. And here, king f3 is, again, one of the top moves, as it has the idea of going king e3 to cover the d2 square so the rook can't invade. I can appreciate that, but I went rook b7 because I'm continuing with my plan. Rook d2, king f3, and I went from like +2 down to, it's like equal after king f3. Well, you know, I got that much of an edge. Rook c2, and I've got to play passively now. So something's gradually gone wrong. So let's bounce back after g6. If king f3, rook d2, rook a8 is the idea, as this forcing line, the only way you can hold the c-pawn is to bring this rook back. For instance, if takes, takes, king e3 looks really strong. Once I get to d3, it's nothing doing. This is a +4 position at this point. So I missed this critical idea. And, I mean, you can look at the clock times and see we both had a minute, but I'm going to be critical because I've seen players be able to play this type of endgame perfectly with seconds on the clock. Of course, they're like GMs and elite, but we can all aspire, right? So I missed a lot here, and I'm like, all right, so I got to hold on to that. Seems necessary to go h4. King g7 makes a lot of sense. Still looking to double, and this is a waiting move because I'm more than anything trying to see what black's going to do. I can't really move this rook as that's going to be a problem. And now I'm starting to worry about this idea, which could be problematic for me. So a lot of things that I'm nervous about. Probably e3 straight away is best, where if they go rook d8, we'll go here, and now he's got to go rook f8. We've got the outside passer, and this is, I think, the best we can do out of the situation. So king g7. Well, he just, I passed, but he essentially gets exactly what he wants anyway. So now I get nervous about the rook b2 idea. And the engine's like, all right, what are you scared of? Because if he does this, you have this. If he checks, nothing to worry about. e3. And if he comes back, this is actually going to end in complete and utter devastation, as our king is walking up to safety to just murder the black king. A little bit of regicide going on. So rook a to a7. Think more aggressively because I curled up in a ball. Now both my rooks are awkward, where they went from great attacking to this. And here, rook a5 would have been more accurate because I need to tether that rook down and etc. So we're getting kind of a dance going. Black has improved his king. Now it's completely equal. as my extra pawn means nothing, as it's very difficult for me to make progress. And as I say that, I'm making some progress. And now we're down to 10 seconds to 12 seconds. This is just a pure time scramble, so forgive my absolute garbage next move, which is essentially like I am just playing a move to play as fast as I can. White is completely winning here after rook d8, as the rook is got multiple targets to choose from to swing over. And you probably want to go with the one that's furthest away from the king, so it's not easy to defend. I play g4, which of course is hot garbage, and it's just scramble land as I'm picking up time, just trying to play faster than my opponent. But notice, even in the scramble, it's f4 just loses on the spot. Oh, that's terrible. The rationale is just this. So, and it's like why people ask me, it's like, well, what's the difference in playing a no increment game versus a 3-2? And 3-2 is harder to play because I would lose this game in 3-2. We'd be picking up time. And if you get that emotional, like, oh, I got to play fast, you're going to do a blunder like this. And that's why a lot of players that are like, well, I don't like playing with the clock, or I don't like playing without an increment. So how do you deal with the pressure situation then? Because at some point, you're going to lose your cool. How do you train to deal with losing your cool? You have to play without an increment. And it happens to the best of us. Apparently, it takes 4 seconds for me to get in frantic mode. And takes. I went with this move because it takes more time to grab. Rook g3 is a draw. But this is a loss. And I went on time in a position that I am now dead lost in after h5. So overall, I felt there was a few points that made this game interesting for the viewers. So hopefully you found it, you know, couple of points of interest there, especially in the end game. But, you know, 1 minute left on the clock. When I've got time, I'm calm, I've got an engine helping me here, database. I'm going to play a better end game with more time to think. So that'll do it for this one.